Um, Otherwise, I think the two things we wanted to talk about today, I sent you an article,
Yeah.
and of course it really popped up with everything we're talking about this month, and it was um, I actually
How to spot and treat team burnout from COVID-19.
yeah, and I'm trying to remember what publication this came from. I think it was Practice Life,
Yeah, I
because
think that's what it was.
I didn't actually connect that in here, but we'll certainly put it on the page. But yeah, how to spot and treat teen burnout from COVID-19, and certainly this is something that, as we've been talking about, affects individuals very very differently, but also because we work in such close quarters,
Yeah,
and and in many cases, we're closer with some of our work people than we are people outside of work.
easily. Yeah,
And I can very much see how, what an entire team, whether it's the dynamics of the hospital or a couple people that are infected or affected, I should say, that kind of just, bring other people in with them. And so this was a really interesting article
yeah.
that kind
I
of
was a
talked.
little confused by they call it emotional fatigue instead of like they use the term burnout, but they also call COVID-19 has intensified emotional fatigue among veterinary teams, which I don't know if those two terms are interchangeable or not.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Yeah,
But they certainly point to increased workload, and especially with everything that's going on right now. I mean,
right.
between people that have been furloughed or different departments that may have been temporarily laid off or what have you, um, those that are still there often have an increased caseload. Or if you just are working in a very very busy hospital and you've had anybody that has maybe been symptomatic or has had to take time away because maybe they live with somebody
Yeah,
who doesn't have great immune system or what have you. So increased workload, financial limitations, of course. Unemployment rate is what, the highest since the Great Depression.
yeah. But probably I think it's higher now.
And
I,
then the lack of social distancing.
yeah,
And so anyway, just some really more so on a team level, how to kind of spot if your hospital is in a bad spot. And obviously it's not an all inclusive type article, but um, for anybody out there that might be wondering, if their team is kind of dealing with this, or we think about this being oftentimes just something that affects one person, right? I mean, we kind of keep an eye on certain people, but in this kind of situation with what we're
it's
going
going to
through
affect
now,
everybody.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And
Well, and
so,
just like you said, the increased workload, not only the increased workload, but the people that are out, like people that are out for, they don't have childcare or,
yeah,
they're not able to come to work or, even in the hospital that I pick up shifts in, they there was a email that went out that said somebody had tested positive. So, that's even
yeah,
more of a strain on just the stress of it and
hmm,
just being able to go to work. And
yeah,
sometimes we go to work and we think, oh, this is going to be an easy shift, and then suddenly we have all these things that pop up. In terms of lack of social distancing, we one of my classes that I'm teaching now is it's animal medical techniques. So there's a lot of skills that I'm supposed to be teaching them, like we're supposed to be teaching them how to do blood draws
yeah,
and giving injections and things like
yeah,
that. And like,
yeah,
there's no way to teach that without
right,
us being on top of each other. It's
right,
physically not possible. So,
yeah,
we're having to shift those things off to a different semester, a different term. But even just being in the hospital in that clinic setting is just it's hard to keep yourself separated from
yeah.
people.
Yeah, it's kind of like, you remember when you were in school and you were teaching like radiation safety, and you did this to hold the animal and get as far away from the table and the beam as
Yeah.
possible. Well, it's really difficult to restrain a dog or a cat like that, and get away
Yeah.
from somebody that might be drawing blood. I mean, it's just the nature of the beast that
Yeah.
we're within inches or a foot or two apart. And what are you going to do? I want to say hi, Jenny Fisher, one of our
Oh,
previous
hi,
guests,
Jenny.
joined.
I'm going to hit the wave button.
Oh
I
yeah,
waved at her.
very nice. Look at you and your Instagram
Yeah.
skills.
Look at me.
Um, so
That
anyway,
was
yeah,
it. I'm done. That's my one skill.
nice,
I could
nice.
hit the thing that tells me what to do.
So the other cool thing that we wanted to talk about, and this was something Joe brought up in his episode, was the ProQual
Yeah.
quiz. And I don't, is this a survey? Would you call it?
Um,
I don't know what to
it's
call
almost
it. It's
like
not a quiz or a test,
it's almost
but
like a worksheet.
yeah, okay, that's a fair
Yeah.
fair assessment. The one thing I would say, and on the website, which we'll link up, and it was linked up in our release of his episode, it's kind of hard to find on the website, which is a bit of a downer. And I would recommend that when you do find it, you actually print it out, because it's 3 pages.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to like tabulate your scores and look back and then categorize them. And it gives you all the information to do that. But it's borderline impossible to do just while you're on your phone and try to remember
Yeah.
everything.
Well,
So,
what I did is I wrote it all down on a sheet of paper.
oh yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Nice. Yeah, I printed it out. I'll say, so it breaks it. So there's 30 questions. If you're not familiar, and it scores from 1 is never, 2 is rarely, 3 is sometimes, 4 is often, and 5 is very often. And I'll just read a couple of the sample type questions. I get satisfaction from being able to help people. I like my work as a helper. I feel worn out because of my work as a helper. I feel bogged down by the system. And so there's 30 of these questions,
Yeah.
and you scale it. And then the one
And
thing that
it's also important to do what you and I did. Don't do it right after a shift, because
Yeah,
your numbers are going to be skewed.
yeah,
I did it actually right after we had recorded the episode with Joe, just because I felt like I was in like a neutral headspace, really,
yeah,
to be able to accurately and unbiasedly give those answers.
yeah, absolutely. And it says to score this as you've experienced things in the last 30 days. Don't
Yeah.
take, your last shift or your entire career into account. We have another person that's joined, Allison, one of my coworkers, who actually lives in my old apartment in Grafton. Hello, Allison.
I'm
So
gonna wave at her.
Yeah, do it. And then it breaks this down into 3 categories. And the 3 categories are compassion, satisfaction, which Joe brought up, and I had never really heard that phrase.
Yeah, we hadn't heard
before.
that term before.
Certainly have heard of compassion fatigue, but compassion satisfaction is essentially the opposite of that. Burnout, and then secondary traumatic stress. And so the questions aren't really grouped together. They're kind of like, take numbers 1, 10, 14,
and I think that's on purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great
Yeah.
that it's that way. And so then you kind of tabulate your scores, and then it's, once you have that information, you say, are you low, moderate, or high in terms of compassion, satisfaction, burnout, or secondary traumatic stress. And I'll tell you, I actually just did this again before I came on, because I wanted to see if
Anything changed?
anything had changed. I haven't been at work since Saturday, and it was
Hey, there's Robin.
Hey, Robin. It was kind of a rough week at work, so I kind of wanted to see how it was. And I will say my compassion satisfaction scale, I scored a moderate. I had 30, and between 23 and 41 is moderate. The burnout scale was also moderate. I was at 31, same thing, between 23 and 41 is moderate. And then secondary traumatic stress was low for me. 22 or less is low, and I was 19. I feel like for everything that I struggle with in this field, I feel like I do pretty well at not taking on people's emotional burdens or stressors as my own, or and so I feel like that score actually adequately represents that kind of thing for me. I was actually kind of surprised. I thought the burnout scale might be a little bit higher. I was
thinking that for my own personal one, because I was my scores were compassion satisfaction. I was a 32. That's moderate. Burnout was 34. That's moderate. And my secondary trauma was 19, just like yours.
Okay.
And that's low. And I thought, because I've got a lot on my plate right now. I've been doing, admittedly, probably far too much that I shouldn't be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought my burnout score would be a lot higher than it actually is.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's interesting to me because just like you, I mean, I've been working in a clinic now for 25 years. And even though I'm in academia, there just aren't a lot of cases or a lot of things anymore that get my juices flowing.
Yeah.
That's just the reality. I mean, I still like teaching, and there's a lot of things I like doing, but there just isn't that like, oh, I've never seen that before all that often anymore. And some of the outside projects, like, I mean, I've said this to you, this podcast honestly is my greatest professional satisfaction these days.
Yeah.
I took, I've been on the the board of directors for the California RVT Association for a few years. I just took over the presidency, and that's very different, and it's stressful in its own right, but it's also a lot of fun being involved in like policy change. And you and I, you're the chair now, but I was the chair of the
Yeah.
credentialing committee, and that also gets stressful at times, but it's also like fascinating to be part of that process and
Yeah, it is. It
see
really
these
is.
people that are going through the applications and read the case reports, as you said before, from other countries, that things that we don't deal with. And so sometimes those are actually great, but all of those things don't put money in our checking
Well,
accounts.
yeah, that's
And so
true.
we still have to do this job to
Yeah.
do that. And so then that all just becomes extra, and an
Well,
already stressful job. It
and
just
just kind of
adds.
think back. I mean, you and I are ECC nerds, so we go back to when we first got into emergency. Like, we saw all the stuff that we hadn't seen in general practice, and all that stuff got us
Mhm.
really excited, and because it was new.
Yeah.
And now 20 years later,
Yeah.
all those things that were new are no longer new.
Right.
So now we have to find stuff like being chairs of committees, being on carvta,
Yeah.
doing this podcast, things that are not stuff we've been doing for 20 years, to get our creative juices flowing and our minds working again to get through some of these things. So some of the stuff that I was talking to one of my students today, and she was talking about a GDV that came in. I was like, oh, I haven't seen GDV in so long, because I'm teaching now. I get
Yeah.
to teach about it, but I don't actually get to be involved in it and do all the those endorphins and rushing around and getting x-rays done and getting catheters in, getting fluids going, and starting to treat for shock and all that stuff. Like, I don't get to do that anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, I do when I go in, but again, it's been a while since I've actually gone in. So, it's hard to keep your mind fresh and keep your mind engaged when you've been doing the same thing for 20 years. That's why we have to find different stuff for us to do.
Yeah.
Which is this
Yeah.
this podcast is a big part of that.
Yeah. Agreed.
Somebody's asking you what type of IPA you like. I'm not a big fan of IPAs.
That's my buddy Chris from back home. He knows I'm a double IPA guy. I trade beer with him when I'm back home. Chris, if you're still listening, I'm drinking a double IPA from Triple Crossing in Richmond, Virginia. But I think you kind of were in the same type of practice when you were up in New Hampshire. When I worked in Southern California, which was overnight weekend ER, the technicians did everything. We did the anesthesia. We were surgery techs. We were triage techs. We were all that stuff. And where I am now, I'm primarily in the ICU by my choice, because I much prefer critical care to emergency.
Yeah.
But the other day I went down to the cardiology room to talk to the cardiology resident about a case, and he was going through an echo of a patient we had in hospital, and he was looking for a vegetative lesion because he was sure this dog had endocarditis. And he was taking the echo and just focusing on the valves and doing like a whole 360 modeling of this. And it was like fascinating. And I was thinking to myself in that moment, like, I wonder if I actually went to other departments. I love cardiology, but if I went to anesthesia, or if I went to surgery and saw things that now I haven't seen in several years, like, would that feeling come back? I don't know.
It might.
I don't know. So it was something that kind of hit me in that moment. Like,
I mean, it's worth a try, right?
Yeah.
What's the worst? You hate it. And you go back to ICU, and then.
Yeah. But I mean, again, in that space, I know I wouldn't get to just like look through echoes all day.
Well, yeah.
So it's anyway. Yeah. So it was the ProQual quiz. Again, we'll link it to this page, or it's definitely in the notes already of Joe DeFulio's episode. But anybody that wonders, are you experiencing compassion fatigue? Are you experiencing burnout? And as Joe taught us, was it burnout that is a part of compassion fatigue, or do I have that?
So compassion fatigue is burnout plus secondary trauma.
Yes. Okay. So secondary traumatic stress, I had no idea like factored into that.
Yeah.
So that was.
Really, and we thought
learn.
Compassion fatigue was its own thing.
Right.
Burnout was its own thing. And
there is some relationship.
There is relationship. Yeah.
So, again, not when you're in a reactionary place, not right when you get home from the worst shift you've ever had in your life, you take this quiz. But after you've maybe had a couple days off, you can kind of be in a little bit of a reflective place. sit down and take this quiz and accurately score yourself. Again, as you're reading these questions and you go through, you kind of think the way they're laid out, you don't think they really have anything to do with each other.
Right.
And that's that, as you said, that's by design. And then you
Yeah.
kind of start grouping them together and you get your score. And maybe you're just in a moderate range, which frankly, I don't really know what to do with that other than
Yeah.
it does say somewhere in there, maybe retest yourself in a couple of weeks and see if you're
Yeah.
trending upward, if you're trending
Right.
downward, or if you're staying about the same. But it's really important to kind of know where you're at,
Yeah.
because you and I have been doing this for 25 years, but I work with plenty of people that are 25 years old, and I would like to see them not get to this place
Yeah.
if they're
Yeah.
still even in this field in
Right.
25 years, but
Right.
not get to that place and actually be ahead of it, and hopefully I'm pretty fortunate. I feel like at Tufts that these are things that we're pretty proactive about.
Yeah.
The solutions are always difficult, because that usually means hiring more people and paying people better and
Yeah.
things that unfortunately cost money. But if you have a good handle on your headspace and where you're at, and if you're trending upward, trending downward, or as I don't want to give it away, but as the guest we interviewed yesterday, if the tide is going out or if the tide is coming in,
Right.
it's something that I think everybody would benefit, and not even just in our field, but so many other
Oh
fields
yeah.
would
And
benefit
I
from
don't
having
think
an
this
idea
is,
about it.
I don't think this is a veterinary,
Mm-mm.
not a
No,
veterinary product. It's,
and
it's
and the questions kind of just talk about being a helper,
right.
right? It's
Right.
not as like not your job as a veterinary technician,
Right.
but your job or your work as a helper,
Yeah.
or just helping. So I think it applies to a number of things. The one thing that I did notice, and I'd be very curious to see, is this is version 5, which was dated 2009.
Right.
So it
They
is,
do, they do have, older versions of it that you can compare,
yeah,
what they changed. I looked at that
yeah,
earlier today, and they just changed the wording on some of the things, I
yeah,
think, to make it more universal as
yeah.
opposed to more focused on one thing.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like not a whole lot would probably change, but I'd be very curious if they updated it at any point now or in the future,
Yeah.
what things would look
Well,
like.
and I think
So
also what I did when I went through these questions is I tried to not go through and just pour over the questions and say, how do I really feel?
right,
I was
yeah,
kind of reactionary,
yeah,
basically.
agree,
I
yeah,
wanted to give the answer that first popped into my head,
yeah,
without sitting there and saying, well, no, on this day it wasn't so bad, but on this day it was
yeah,
really bad.
yeah,
Like being able to go through and kind of just give that
yeah. This is how I feel
reaction.
now.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. I
This is
think
how I
that's,
feel now about how I've been doing,
yeah,
which is really what they're trying to do, is try to
yeah,
get a baseline for what you're doing right now.
yeah,
And I found it really interesting to go through, and you know the fact that you and I both came up with moderate, even though we feel like we're not moderate. I wonder how much of that is us overthinking it and saying, well, I don't want to give answers that are too high or too low.
right,
I don't want to skew it in one way or the other, but maybe we will take it again, um, in a few days or in a couple weeks to see if anything's changed and see if anything's different. And
yeah,
I feel like these mental health issues, these episodes that we've had, I found a lot of things where I'm like, oh, I'm gonna look into that. I'm gonna
mm,
and see if I can make that work. And maybe if we implement some of those things that our guests are talking about, maybe we can, maybe bring our trend down and maybe bring our trend more towards that low level for all three of these things, instead of, well, I guess the compassion satisfaction, we don't want to be low, we want that to be high. But
right,
maybe we can kind of swing the shift one way or the other to get ourselves in a better spot, even if we rank kind of in the middle of the road. If we can sway it just slightly in the other direction, maybe that's going to get us back on the right path.
yeah, agreed, agreed. Um, one other thing we have done in previous Taproom episodes that we actually didn't talk about, so this is going to be a little bit on the
Oh
fly,
yeah,
is something positive.
something positive.
Something positive. And of course, with everything that's going on right now, it sometimes is a little bit difficult to find. But one thing I will say, in terms of my work or my job, is how proactive Tufts has been with, I mean, if you are exhibiting symptoms of any kind, It's not just, I mean, obviously, like you said, your supervisor, you've got this going on, but you email the dean
Yeah.
and say like, hey, I'm doing this, and you kind of start a
Mm.
conversation. And it's, even though, as we actually talked about earlier, certainly if somebody develops symptoms and then they're out for a couple days or up to 2 weeks or whatever, and then it's so right, so then that makes those that are left behind, work that much harder, and
Yeah.
their caseload goes up. And so, for the person that is now out for a little while, they probably have maybe some secondary traumatic stress about leaving their
Yeah.
teammates behind.
Well, yeah, of course.
And then, of course, those that are left behind to pick up the slack, their workload is higher. But the reality is it's actually a very good thing. And honestly, this goes back to like pre-COVID days. I would always much rather people stay home and not
Yeah.
bring colds and flus
Yeah,
or
because those,
coronavirus into
I
work. And
mean,
like,
we're in such close quarters. Anyone that
yeah,
gets a
yeah,
cold is going to give it to somebody else. It's just
absolutely.
going to
And
happen.
a lot of times when a regular illness, a cold or a flu, I'm not even talking about coronavirus here, but when it comes into an animal hospital, I mean, that thing bounces around for
Yep.
months,
Yep.
between the front staff and the back staff. And
Yep.
it goes round and round, and it mutates once or twice, and people get it 2 or 3 times. And like, I would much rather just have people stay home. And in this particular situation, they have been so proactive. And that's actually like really good to see that they're supportive, and say, hey, like, this is what we need to do right now. So
Yeah.
I definitely want to say, like, even though there are days like, man, there really isn't anybody else left to be able to call in, because that's just the way that it
Yeah.
is. But like, also at the same time, I would much rather that person be home and be safe,
Yeah.
and
And get better.
frankly, yeah, get better. And regardless, my shift is going to end in X number of hours, and we'll figure it out tomorrow. And
Yeah.
so anyway, so the whole idea of actually being a little bit proactive about that was, even though sometimes it's frustrating, it is actually overall like a really good thing. So
Yeah.
how about you?
And
You got anything?
well, I'm just thinking that I'm looking forward to when things kind of go back to normal, and not just, I'm hoping, and I feel like this is going to happen, is that we're going to go back to a normal that's different. We're not going to go back to what we were in December or January. We're going to go back to some modified version of all these protocols that we've worked so hard
Yeah,
to get
yeah,
developed and get to work, uh, and have that be the new normal.
yeah,
As much as we may say that it's annoying to do curbside triage and things like that, but we're going to change it somewhat to the point
hmm,
where it's going to be more conducive to what situation we're in, and also it's going to protect us. It's going to make us better.
yeah,
I feel like doing some of those distancing things of not being close to people, and kind of like you said, colds come in and run all the way through the hospital. I think
yeah,
people are going to be more proactive about not being involved in that, and not coming into work when they're dealing with that. And I think that may be one of the big positives that I'm hoping to take out of this. Like right now, I don't know if that's the way it's going to happen, but
yeah,
that's what I'm
yeah.
hoping for.
I sure hope so. I hope we learn something that we can apply going
Yeah.
forward. Like,
Yeah.
otherwise, what was the point?
Right.
And, I think about too, like patient visits. Now we have visiting hours on the weekdays from 5 to 8, which is in the evening. Of course, when people get off work, and when we have an ICU full of 20 patients or more, and it's a fairly small room. It's certainly smaller than your treatment room at your old VECM up
Oh
in
yeah.
Hampshire.
Yeah.
So it gets packed pretty quickly, and we don't have like a maximum occupancy. We didn't have a maximum number of visits or family members or what have you. And there was times like we as the technicians couldn't even get, and then the pods of all the different services, cardiology, internal medicine, et cetera, their pods of faculty and interns and residents and students come through to do rounds. And so all of a sudden at 6 o'clock, there's now 100 people
Yeah.
in a room
Yeah.
that's literally 20 by 20.
Yeah.
And I mean, I used to think to myself, like, this is a fire hazard. Like, if a fire alarm goes off right now, like,
Yeah.
it's going to be one of those funny situations where everybody like tries to run for the door and you all get stuck. Like, that's literally what would happen. And so
Yeah.
I wonder, like, okay, can we apply that to only 3 patients can have visitors at one time,
Yeah.
only 2 visitors per patient, only 1 visit per patient per day. Like, and those are small things, but when I look back at how it was, previously, that's actually a really big
Yeah.
and potentially positive change.
Yeah.
And if, again, I don't make those decisions, so maybe nothing happens, but even though that's a small thing, if we actually learn something and use that as a way to make
Yeah.
effective change that's for the better, otherwise, what was the point?
Yeah. Exactly.
Otherwise, it was
It,
just, 2 or 3 months of major inconvenience.
yeah. And you bring up my old practice in New Hampshire, VECM. I want to give a shout out to them because they're opening up a new practice on
Yeah.
the 27th. I think they're going to have a live,
Virtual open
a
house.
virtual open house, which is going to be really cool. I'm hoping to log into that. I think it's on the 27th.
Yeah.
But I'm really looking forward to getting back in touch with those guys. And I've been following them on Facebook and getting text message from everybody how things are going, and
Yeah.
that's gonna be really cool. I hope at some point people actually get to go in the building because it looks really nice.
I know. Through the fantasy football league that we have with all of them and stuff, they're
Yeah.
like my second adopted hospital family in New
Yeah.
England. But it looks like a beautiful spot,
Yeah.
and I know they do top
Yeah.
notch care up there.
Yep.
So that's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Well,
I don't really have anything else
I
to.
guess we don't really know how to end these things.
I know. This is all new territory.
Yeah.
Other than,
But maybe the next time around, this is gonna be it's gonna go real smooth. And
yeah.
I got my one Instagram skill going. I know how to wave to people. Although some people have come in, don't give me the option to wave at them. So I don't know if it's because I don't know them or what the deal is.
Yeah, but we have had a couple other people join, come and go.
Thank you all for joining.
Yes, thank you very much for stopping by the Vet Tech Taproom.
Yes.
Hope you enjoyed
Cheers.
some kind of adult beverage. It's 4:30, and I don't have anything to do the rest of the night, so I will for sure be having a few more. But
I have plenty to do, but
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I think it's time we sign off. Yeah.
I think so.
All right. Well,
thanks everybody.
Thanks everybody for listening, and it was great that you guys came by.
It's great to see you, April.
Hope to see you guys soon. Yes, and be well, everybody. We'll talk to you later.
All right. Bye. Okay, so it's giving. Oh, we had 10 viewers. Yeah. So it gives me the option to share to story. Is that what I want to do?
Yes, and then when you do that.